The 5 biggest needs for the Minnesota Vikings this 2021 offseason. This is counting both, this is not just draft needs, this is both draft needs and just free agent signings. But really, a lot of it is draft needs because of how bad the cap scenario for the Minnesota Vikings are. A lot of this, they're going to need to draft replacements because we can't just go on signing a bunch of big name players. Anyways, at number 5, the 5th biggest need for the Minnesota Vikings is cornerback. And I'm honestly so happy that the Minnesota Vikings, their 5th biggest need is cornerback. And although a lot of it has to do with the fact that they have bigger needs, like there's big needs for the Vikings and then there's just needs. Cornerback is just a need for the Minnesota Vikings. And for so many years, cornerback has been number 1, number 2 on this list, and now coming at number 5 is a huge progression. And honestly, it all has to do with Cameron Dantzler and Jeff Gladney because both of them are looking promising. I mean, Cameron Dantzler, drafted in the 3rd round, is looking like a promising possible cornerback number 1 in the future. And Jeff Gladney is looking like a good nickelback. Now, of course, he doesn't really look like a starting cornerback quite yet, although he is a great tackler. He did miss a few tackles, but of course, overall, through college and everything, he is a great tackler, and I would like to see him at nickelback. And honestly, I would like to see him blitzed more. Of course, blitzing cornerback is not very common in the NFL, but I would like to see Jeff Gladney used like that. Anyways, those are our number 1 and 2 corners right there because honestly, Mike Hughes' career might be done. I mean, the Minnesota Vikings, we don't have to pay Mike Hughes very much to play here. Of course, he was a first-round draft pick, but once again, with all these injuries, he's only playing a couple games every season. Mike Hughes is injured more than he is even healthy, so for that reason, I'm going to assume that Mike Hughes' career is done. And you hate to see injuries ruin people's career, but he was a cornerback number 1, and honestly, he looked like he could have been a hit. He had a lot of talent. I remember in his first game, his NFL debut, he had a pick 6. Minnesota Vikings didn't have a pick 6 all season. So Mike Hughes, honestly, if he doesn't get injured again, I could see him being a cornerback number 1. But once again, this is wishful thinking. And Mike Hughes, he will get injured, and I do think that has to ruin his career. And honestly, we're just going to have to say that it will because you have to plan for the worst. Of course, Dantzler and Jeff Gladney being a cornerback 1 and 2 is fine. But you need to draft other guys because both of them are injury prone. Both Cameron Dantzler and Jeff Gladney both missed games this year with an injury. And you don't want 2 second-year players to be your cornerback 1 and 2. For that reason, number 5 is cornerback. And the Minnesota Vikings should draft a cornerback. Of course, we don't have a second-round draft pick and don't take a cornerback in the 1st round with all these other needs. So even just swinging on maybe a possible free agent veteran, taking someone in the 4th round, don't have to go crazy with cornerback this year. It's not a big of a need as it was the last 2 seasons. Number 4, also staying in defensive backs, is safety. People can argue safety to be number 2 spot on this list. I have safety at number 4 because, yes, we have Harrison Smith. He is a great safety and still one of the best in the NFL. Led the team in sacks and was up there in tackles as well. Harrison Smith is still one of the best safeties in the NFL. But he is an aging player. Anthony Harris, you go over there, he's still a solid starter, but once again, you can't pay him. He's now a free agent, and I've made an episode where I was talking about you cannot bring Anthony Harris back. We don't have the money to bring him back. For that reason, we need to get a replacement because we don't have a replacement yet. Our other 2 safeties on the depth chart are Miles Dorn and Josh Metellus, who were 6th and 7th round draft picks in 2019. Now, of course, we have not seen a whole lot from these guys, but assuming from the spot that they were drafted, they are not ready to play. They're not ready to play as a safety, a starting safety in the NFL. And Anthony Harris, his departure is going to be huge with the Minnesota Vikings. Of course, did not have a great season in 2020, but a big piece that has been a part of this Minnesota Vikings defense the last 5 seasons, and we're going to have to move on from him. And we don't have his replacement yet. Maybe bringing back Andrew Sendejo. He is a free agent. He played with the Browns for 1 season. He is a free agent now. Bringing him back is a possibility. Once again, even if you bring him back, though, both of your safeties are over the age of 30, and you're going to have to move on from these guys eventually. So even bringing him back, we're going to need to draft guys and hopefully use them as transitional pieces. Now, Harrison Smith is going to be here for another 5 seasons. I'd be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if he played another 3 contracts with the Vikings. He is. How do you look so good every single season you've been in the NFL? This guy's been in the NFL for over 10 seasons and looks good every season. Okay, coming in at number 3, defensive line. People can argue defensive line to be the biggest need for the Minnesota Vikings this offseason, but once again, injuries is the reason why our defensive line was this bad. I mean, Michael Pierce opting out of the season was huge. This was coming off of a season where we had no run-stopping game at all. We brought in Mike Pierce, one of the greatest run-stopping defenders in the NFL, and can rush the passers from the inside. Look at how the Vikings suffered this season. We couldn't rush the passer without blitzing. The only time I saw the Vikings being able to get to the passer was when they blitzed Eric Wilson and Harrison Smith. We couldn't get to the passer without blitzing. We couldn't stop the run, and I think we all know that. We are 27th against the run, and honestly, should be worse than that, but that's because teams can also pass all over us. They can run all over us. They can pass all over us. We are one of the worst run-stopping defenses in the NFL, and honestly, losing Danielle Hunter again, losing Everson Griffin, losing all of these guys, we had no pass rush. So we had one of the worst defensive lines in the NFL just because of those two reasons. And then you look at it. If Michael Pierce comes back and does not opt out and still looks like the Michael Pierce we have seen with the Baltimore Ravens, and if Danielle Hunter comes back and still looks like Danielle Hunter like 2 seasons ago, that massively improves our defense right there. But once again, you have to look at it. You don't want Afadi starting another season. Shamar Stephen is aging. He's going into his 30s. You don't want to pay for him another contract, especially with the cap scenario the Vikings are in. You need to bring in new guys. Is it the biggest need for the Vikings? No, because we don't need to put up a whole lot for them. We don't need to draft a defensive lineman in the first round. We can bring back Everson Griffin. Everson Griffin is looking like he will take a pay cut to play for the Vikings, and that will be huge. Using Everson Griffin, maybe you don't even start him. Maybe you just use him as like a transitional guy, transitioning it into possibly DJ Wanham. DJ Wanham showed a lot of promise as a 4th-round draft pick, and I'm very excited for what I see from DJ Wanham, and I want him to be a future in the starter. Haven't seen enough yet, but I would like to see more from DJ Wanham this 2021 season. And using Everson as a transitional guy, adding a veteran to the defensive line would be huge for the Minnesota Vikings. And just adding him and possibly drafting a rookie. Now, right now, we have we have a lot of great backups. I mean, James Lynch and Armand Wantz are great backup running backs, backup defensive linemen. And I would love to see but one of them be a starter in the future, possibly filling in for Shamar Stephen's shoes. But again, Vikings have to draft a defensive lineman. Every year we have to draft a defensive lineman. 4th round. Take someone in the 4th round. You just need to draft 1 defensive lineman. Probably 2 would be better. But still, you have like 4 4th-round draft picks, just draft defensive linemen. It's a big need for the Vikings, and if Michael Pierce and Danielle Hunter come back, it still won't fix all of our problems, but once again, that wouldn't put us 27th best defensive line in the NFL. Anyways, number 2, special teams. This special teams for the Vikings have been bad for far too long. I mean, we have one of the worst special teams in the NFL, and we've always suffered at kicker. I mean, Dan Bailey is coming off of the worst season of his career, and he's getting paid a lot. What is he making? $1.4 million in 2021? We got to move on from Dan Bailey. We have to find a replacement. Yes, cutting his contract will only save us $1 million. But once again, it's not about the money at this point. We just need a new kicker. You don't need to draft someone. This is what's great about special teams players. You don't need to draft them. You just need to go out in free agency and find a bunch of guys. They don't cost very much at all. We have no good kick return game. We have no good kicker. We can't play in special teams. We have no good blocking either. The Vikings special teams has been one of the worst in the last few seasons, and it's honestly the reason why this Vikings offense is not putting up as many points. Because they're starting at their own 20. How are the Vikings going to be able to compete when our special teams has been this bad? And you don't need to put a whole lot into it. We fired our special teams coordinator, thank God, because we needed someone else to be in control of the special teams. I'm happy they fired him. I don't know if they fired him. I think they just didn't give him another contract. Anyways, rounds 5 through 7, the Vikings can draft players for special teams. Don't draft a kicker. I'm not a huge fan of drafting kickers. Just grab someone from free agency. Just try out a bunch of guys. You don't need to draft a kicker. But you can draft a punt and kick returner, though. You can definitely draft another punt and kick returner because KJ Osborne is not looking like it. Amir Abdullah is the best guy you got. You don't want Amir Abdullah to be the best guy you got. Chad Beebe, also another guy. You just don't want these guys to be your best player. I can't say Amir Abdullah and Chad Beebe are awful, but once again, you got to just swing until you find a good kick punt returner. The Minnesota Vikings special teams comes at number 2 for biggest needs for the Vikings offseason. And by no surprise, the biggest need for the Vikings this offseason is guard. Because I have seen the worst season from Minnesota Vikings offensive guards I have ever seen. I mean, Pat Elflein started out this season, and going into the 2020 season, we knew how bad Pat Elflein was. He started it out. He was gone. He got injured. Drew Samia came in and looked even worse than Pat Elflein. Meanwhile, at left guard, we have Dakota Doja starting every single game, and all he's doing for us is getting a bunch of holding fouls. I mean, this is the worst guard scenario in the NFL. We could not have been at a worse spot. Dakota Dozier, he's got to be gone. Drew Samia, I don't want to see him play another snap in the NFL. Pat Elflein, he's already gone, so you don't really got to do anything there. We just need new guards. And right now, Brandon Sheriff and Joe Thuney are going into free agency and likely are not looking like they might be with their team another season, especially Joe Thuney with the New England Patriots. He's looking like he's going to play for another season. Vikings should just use their money that they have on a new guard and draft some rookie. In the first round, maybe, because that's how important guards are. When you have a quarterback like Kirk Cousins, you need to put all the draft capital you have on the offensive line. Minnesota Vikings drafting a guard in the first round may seem like a bit of a reach, but once again, with how big of a need it is, Minnesota Vikings drafting a guard in the first round would make a lot of sense. Trading into the second round, trading down to the second round, or up into the second round could also be a spot because the Minnesota Vikings don't have a second round draft pick because of the Unique Ngakoue trade. But still, finding someone in the second round, if you trade down or trade up, could also be a scenario. I just want to see a new rookie on the offensive line at the guard position. And then possibly grabbing a veteran to add a veteran to the offensive line. I mean, this is a huge need for the Minnesota Vikings and a big gap between all the rest. Like, you have guard is the biggest need for the Minnesota Vikings and a far drop-off, and then you have special teams and all of these other spots. Guard needs to be the primary focus this offseason because our offensive line gets a lot of hate, and there's not bad players. I mean, Riley Reif had a great season, allowed 0 sacks in 2020. Brian O'Neill, we know, is good. Garrett Bradbury's looking fine. I mean, he's not looking like a first-round draft pick, but he is looking like a starter. He is holding his own. It's just those guards that are holding us back. And if the Minnesota Vikings can fix those guards, allowing Kirk enough time inside the pocket to find a guy, I mean, he has like 3 seconds every time. I'd like to see him move around a lot more too. Anyways, guard. Biggest need for the Minnesota Vikings this offseason. And honestly, drafting one in the first round may seem like a bit of a reach, but I will take it 10 times out of 10. Let me know what y'all think.